Sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones in the shadows, and sometimes they're standing right in front of you, smiling, shaking your hand. Tonight, I'm going to tell you the chilling story of Henry Lee Lucas, a man with an empty stare and hollow smile, who convinced the world he was something far darker than anyone could have imagined. But what's even more disturbing? How many people believed him, and how many shadows still linger around his name? Picture this. A man who claimed to have committed unspeakable acts across every dark corner of America, all while calmly sitting across from police officers hanging onto every word. But was it real? Or was it something far more sinister? A game of lies that left real ghosts in its wake? Stay with me, because once we start, there's no turning back. Henry Lee Lucas was no ordinary man. From the moment he was born, something was off. Born in a decaying log cabin deep in the woods of Virginia, Henry's childhood was a nightmare you couldn't wake up from. His mother, as cold and ruthless as winter itself, forced him to watch as strange men came and went, their faces lost in smoke and shadow, their voices low and threatening. If Henry turned away, she beat him, and then laughed, as if her cruelty gave her life. Even as a boy, Henry drifted through life like a ghost, one glassy eye, a chilling reminder of a violent attack by his own brother, staring blankly at a world that had shown him nothing but pain. And maybe, just maybe, that's where the darkness first took root. But the true horror wouldn't come to light until years later. In the sweltering streets of Florida, Lucas found a companion as dark as himself, Otis Toole, a man with an empty smile and eyes that glinted cold. To outsiders, they were just drifters, wandering from town to town, appearing like an unpredictable storm. But ask anyone who crossed paths with them, and they'd say something about them wasn't right. They met in the shadows of a rundown soup kitchen, hungry for more than food. Some say they whispered about unspeakable things. Others said they laughed when no one was watching, a laugh that made your skin crawl. And it wasn't just the two of them. Soon, an innocent face was pulled into their twisted orbit. Becky Powell, a young girl with a childlike mind, clinging to Henry as if he were her protector. But who was protecting her? In the summer of 1982, Becky Powell and an elderly woman named Kate Rich disappeared. No screams, no trace, just empty rooms and a silence heavier than a grave. The townsfolk whispered about what might have happened, though no one dared say it aloud. When Henry was finally arrested, sitting there quietly, almost as if waiting, the stories started spilling out. He spoke of dark fields where no light ever touched, of nights when even the wind stood still. And he spoke of Becky, the girl who had trusted him, the girl who walked with him into the night and never returned. But was it true? Or the beginning of something even darker? A web of lies so intricate, even the police were trapped in it. Behind cold steel bars, Henry talked. First about Becky and Kate. But soon, his confessions grew bolder, his gaze darker. He claimed to have killed hundreds, across dozens of states. Desperate for answers, police leaned in. They took him to crime scenes, fed him details, and Henry gave them backstories that matched exactly what they wanted to hear. And here's where the nightmare takes a terrifying twist. Because as Henry confessed, cases were closed. Families were told they had answers. And the world believed that the man smiling behind bars was America's worst nightmare. But something wasn't right. Journalists, the brave ones, started to notice cracks in his story. How could Henry be in Texas and Florida on the same day when they were hundreds of miles apart? How could he know details that were never made public, unless someone gave them to him? And then came the most chilling question of all. What if Henry hadn't done any of it? What if the man everyone thought was a monster was just a liar? But if he was lying, who did commit those horrific acts? And worse, were they still out there? Even the legendary Texas Rangers got caught up in Henry's lies. They closed hundreds of cases thinking they had their answer. But behind closed doors, Henry was being treated to steak dinners, milkshakes, and free reign around jails. They showed him files, helped him refresh his memory, and watched him spin stories so convincing they believed him too. By the time the truth started to emerge, it was too late. Cases were closed. Families were left mourning false answers. And the real monsters, the ones who stole people from their lives, were still out there, in plain sight. When the dust settled, only 11 murders were officially linked to Henry, including his mother. The infamous number, 600, was a lie. But by the time anyone realized it, the damage had already been done. For years, law enforcement paraded Henry Lee Lucas as the ultimate bogeyman, the face of evil itself. He was their answer to every unsolved case, their convenient conclusion. They called him the most prolific serial killer in American history, a man who had slaughtered his way across the country, leaving a trail of devastation behind him. But how did it happen? How did one man, an unremarkable drifter with a long history of deception, convince the world that he was responsible for an impossible number of deaths? It started small, a few confessions here and there. Some were real, like the murder of his mother and Becky Powell. But then the numbers grew. He talked about bodies buried in the woods, about victims no one had even realized were missing. And each time the police listened, eager for closure. They wanted to believe him. They needed to believe him. Henry became their golden goose. As long as he kept talking, cold cases were neatly wrapped up. Families, desperate for answers, were given resolutions, no matter how shaky the foundation. And Henry? He was living better than he ever had in his entire life. Steak dinners, strawberry milkshakes, cigarettes, and endless attention. Things a man like him had never been offered before. The more he gave them, the more they rewarded him. And Henry, ever the chameleon, knew exactly what they wanted to hear. He memorized case files they let him peek at. He studied the reactions of detectives as he spoke, fine-tuning his stories in real time. He repeated back details that were secret, but only because they had been whispered to him in the interrogation room. The truth was, Henry had become a performer, and the world was his stage. But not everyone bought into his act. Some reporters and investigators began picking apart his confessions, finding inconsistencies so glaring they were impossible to ignore. How could he describe a crime scene in vivid detail, when it had already been torn down before he was ever brought in? How could he have traveled across the country, committing murders on opposite coasts, in time frames that didn't make sense? Slowly, the cracks widened, and soon, the entire story collapsed. And yet, even as the truth came out, some whispered that maybe, just maybe, Henry had told the truth about a few of them. Maybe among the lies, there were pieces of darkness only he knew, and would take to his grave. Henry Lee Lucas died in 2001. But if you visit his grave, they say the wind still howls through the trees. And if you listen closely, you might hear the whispers of the lives left in the shadows. Lives never found. So, what do you think? Was Henry Lee Lucas America's most dangerous man, or a master manipulator? And if he didn't do all those things, who did? Because sometimes the scariest part of the story isn't the monster you know, but the one still hiding in the dark. Sleep well, if you can. If you're still watching, drop a comment. Do you believe Henry Lee Lucas's confessions? Or do you think he played a game that fooled everyone? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more chilling stories. And trust me, the next one I have for you, you won't want to watch it alone.